It's time for the Rider Dynasty podcast. Let's go! Welcome to the Rider Dynasty podcast with Ryan Bickerstaff, JJ Wenner, and your host, Michael Kloss.
Welcome back. Guess what? You are here for the Ride or Dynasty podcast. What an exciting show we have. I know I say that all the time, but I am so excited to be joined by two of my best friends here. Say hello to Ryan Bickerstaff. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm doing quite well. And JJ, I trust that you're doing well as well?
Absolutely. Never a bad day, brother. Never a bad day.
Well, we're talking fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football here on the Rider Dynasty podcast, and we're continuing our division previews. We want to get right to them. Last episode, we knocked out the AFC South. Ryan, where are we headed today?
And today we're in the NFC North.
And it's the same setup as before. We're going to just take a look under the hood of the AFC North, like Ryan said. We're going to discuss all of the fantasy-relevant players, and each of us will highlight one rising star, one fading star, and one sleeper.
And this is also the part of the pod where we get a chance to tell you to catch all of our updated rankings and content. We're at riderdynasty.com, and you can also find us on Twitter. Our handle is @RiderDynasty. We would love it if you interact with us there. We will do the same. So let's get going. As Ryan said, we're talking about the AFC North. Ryan always kicks us off here with who he's got winning the division and who is coming up short, and JJ and I will follow suit.
All right. I have the Cleveland Browns winning this division. I just think that they're the best team in this division. Baker Mayfield is going to take a big step in year two, and that offense is perhaps the most talented in the NFL. As far as last place, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. I just think that I don't think they're a bad team. I think they're just the worst team in this division, which is going to be very competitive. JJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. This is going to be a very competitive division. I actually have the Baltimore Ravens winning. I like how they've gone all in on Lamar Jackson and have built a team around him to best utilize his strengths. For last place, I'm actually going with Cleveland. I think this is going to be a little bit of too many egos and not enough good coaching. It's going to be very hard for them to spread that ball around and keep everybody happy. And it's either going to end up, like Ryan said, where they're going to be like the best offense, or it's going to be a colossal failure.
Guys, I actually am really having some trouble evaluating this division because I kind of think that anyone can actually win. I know Cincinnati is going to have a huge uphill battle to do that. I'm probably, again, looking at maybe the Steelers to pull something out because Ben might have another good year, and if he can keep that up. Last place, again, I'm just kind of playing back and forth between the Bengals and maybe the Baltimore Ravens if other teams make Lamar Jackson one-dimensional, but he still might play really well. So I think this is kind of a toss-up, which is why I'm looking the most forward to talking this division. So we're going to take a first look into the Ravens, and we start at the quarterback position of the guy I just mentioned, Lamar Jackson. I would love, JJ, to hear from you first because, not to steal your thunder, but he is your rising star.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Lamar Jackson. I think that what you keep hearing from everybody is that he's all legs and no arm. And if he can pass, why didn't they pass last year? You know, they went into last season completely building an offense for Joe Flacco. Lamar Jackson had very few reps with the first-team offense. The receivers practiced their routes with Flacco. The offensive line was designed to protect Flacco. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco don't play alike. So in walks right. So in walks Lamar Jackson and everything changes. The offense changes. He's able to move in the pocket better and escape pressure. So the offensive line doesn't quite know where he's going to be. And all of those things affected how the offense went. Now, he has had all offseason to work with his receivers. Gone are Crabtree and Brown. In walks Hollywood and Boykin. Alex Collins and Buck Allen leave. Mark Ingram and Justice Hill come in. All right, so you have a definite upgrade in talent. You have more time with an offensive line. Now, what we have to talk about, though, is the fourth quarter. All right? In the fourth quarter of games, even if you watch the playoff game, all of a sudden they started to let Lamar Jackson pass the ball. And what did he do? He delivered. He was able to bring them back in games through the use of his legs and his arm. Hopefully, they're going to let him pass earlier now that they have more weapons. And I think you're going to be able to see him hopefully start approaching that QB1 range. Right now, his ADP is QB 16 in a 1 QB league. But now I know he's also your riser, Michael. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked, just because obviously I see his dynasty value just pretty much ascend every game he plays. I just kind of want to know, again, with his rushing floor, is he Cam Newton or is he Vince Young, right? His rushing attempts last year were third all-time for a rookie, and that was behind RG3 and Cam Newton. I think that he's got work to do, again, as a pocket passer, but he doesn't need to be that. One of the interesting stats that I was looking when I was kind of doing some research on Mr. Jackson here was the Ravens called play action 43% of the time, so that really gave him a chance to make any kind of play. And I love coaches that tailor to their players, and you know that sounds like an obvious thing, but you watch like a Chip Kelly when he just completely misused DeMarco Murray. And I know that there are others that I just can't think of, but I'm excited to see them actually put in an offense that that he can be successful at. So like I said, doesn't need to be a pocket passer. I think that his rushing ability gives him the upside of a QB1, but he is someone that I am rushing, no pun intended, to get to in Dynasty. Well, I didn't. You know what? I did not ask for the peanut gallery. Okay, I just wanted to make that comment. So I think that there's a lot of excitement there. When you look at the running backs, Ryan, what's your thought on the Ravens bringing in Mark Ingram?
I love Mark Ingram. I think he can have a really great season. Baltimore is a run-first football team, and they have a really good offensive line, and I can foresee Mark Ingram having a career year in 2019, but
that could be pretty special too, especially from coming from an offense like New Orleans.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think that he's going to get that utilization that he might not have had in New Orleans. Like for the past few years, he's been splitting carries with, and snaps with Alvin Kamara, and he doesn't really have an Alvin Kamara caliber player in Baltimore that he's really sharing time with. I can see Justice Hill getting his snaps, and I think that Gus Edwards can be like a solid like backups handcuff type player. But I think as long as Ingram stays healthy, he's going to have a career year in this new system.
Now I noticed you mentioned Gus Edwards, and I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there, and I think the reason for that fade on Gus Edwards is Justice Hill. Looking at Hill's tape, I see he's got fantastic vision. He's really elite in space. Obviously, he's not a power back, but that's what they have Ingram there for, right? And I think Ingram does have a few good years left, at least one more of being elite. So I'm with you there, Ryan. I feel like that Edwards is the casualty because of the Ingram addition. Ingram's only missed 8 games in the last 4 years, and that'd be 4 years or 4 games in the last 3 years. So I just don't see him getting on the field a whole heck of a lot. As far as any other running backs, are there anybody else that are we still thinking Kenneth Dixon, JJ? Is he even in the mix, or have we long since forgotten him because of the Mark Ingram addition?
I wouldn't overlook Kenneth Dixon. He played in 6 games last year. He had 330-some yards rushing. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry. He's a solid running back. I think he's had a lot of injuries, but he's only 24. So I wouldn't overlook him still getting a shot and possibly beating out somebody like Gus Edwards for the 3rd running back role.
Yeah, that's a great point. If I may move to the wide receivers, because I think that this is a great topic of conversation that might be, everybody here might be a little undervalued, if you will, just because of the thought of Lamar Jackson and being a primary rusher. Tell me about Willie Snead, JJ. I see him as your sleeper.
Yeah, I have Willie Snead as my sleeper this year. He is right now the wide receiver 1 on that team. He's going to be starting on the outside. He's going to be on the field for most of the snaps. I don't think there is a question that he will end up being the highest scoring wide receiver on this team. But I don't know how valuable that is. Right?
Yeah,
It's like being
right.
the tallest dwarf at a bagel shop.
Oh, timely too. You know what? You can't make fun of Willie Snead unless you're his dad, God, or his boss, I think was the line.
That's correct.
You gotta say it with the New York accent too.
Yeah, I don't do accents.
Did you see the follow up to that video too? There's a second part.
I did see the second part.
Yeah, he gets really angry. He throws his breakfast or his bagel, and then he takes 2 steps, and then he goes back and gets it. He's like, I'm taking this.
Well,
it's worth it.
I mean, honestly.
If you pay for it.
Leave the gun, take the cannolis.
Yeah.
But I think in the long run on this team that if Lamar Jackson is the real deal, Willie Snead is going to be a great sleeper. If Lamar Jackson isn't the real deal, then there's no sleeper on this team.
Again, my comment of kind of how I was struggling is because I don't know that I'm really feeling anyone, or at least that I want to take the risk. Last year in a startup, I took Jordan Lasley. I really loved his college career. It was 1,264 yards, 9 touchdowns in 2017. He was another interesting watch on tape, especially just because, you could jack the sound up on those YouTube vids and just listen to Gus Johnson go freaking crazy on on Jordan Lasley. That was probably why I bought into him so much because, I love Gus. He did take a little bit of a learning year, but again, top of the depth chart with Willie Snead. I'm sure he might get taken over by Brown at some point, but he might be a good throw in a trade. That you might be able to grab if you've got a little bit of the bench space. Any other wide receivers that we're looking at on this team? Because I know that we need to mention the rookies.
Yeah, I'm not really loving the wide receiver situation in Baltimore. I think that Hollywood Brown can be a good wide receiver, but I need to see a year of him in the NFL first. I need to see if he can stay healthy. I need to see if his game can translate. He's what, 5'9", like $160, $170 soaking wet. The guy's smaller than I am. I just need to see I want to see a year of him in the NFL first. I think Willie Snead's on his way out. Miles Boykin has a lot of potential too. I like the future of this receiving core, but I'm not loving it in 2019.
All right, let's take a look at the tight ends. I know I see a lot of people excited over Mark Andrews. Ryan, what do you think about Mark Andrews?
All right, so on paper, Baltimore looks like a more smash-mouth version of San Francisco's offense with that power run game. Like similar to San Francisco, they have a bunch of fast wide receivers who can, they can run routes, they can make big plays on occasion. But I think the center of attention on the offense is going to be the tight end, Mark Andrews. Last year, he was one of the few receivers on that Baltimore team that looked like he had any chemistry at all with Lamar Jackson. He flashed throughout the season. He had some big games, peppered in there. I can honestly see him breaking 1,000 yards this year.
Wow.
That year or two. Oh, it's not that crazy to actually. As a rookie, rookie tight ends, they take a few years to, kind of become anything. And Andrews had 552 yards last year. He had a 68% catch percentage, and his average per reception was 16.2. For context, Travis Kelce had a 13.0 yard per reception, and George Kittle had a 15.6. So Mark Andrews is a very talented player. He's good after the catch. He's fast. He's athletic. And he's a guy that Lamar Jackson can rely on. And I think he's going to emerge as the number one target in Baltimore. Baltimore, they love their tight ends. And I think that Andrews might be the next great one.
I'm right there with you. I don't know about the 1,000-yard, but I'm going to let you have all that glory when it actually does happen. I am a fan of his speed, size, and strength. You mentioned his catch percentage and his yardage, 552 last year. I also, just to kind of add and dovetail off what you were saying, was I do anticipate, by Baltimore being a running team, them seeing more stacked boxes. And again, that tight end release or, just kind of fitting in some soft spots in the defense is really going to help, especially where, he's going in his ADP, that as people, start to pick off the, your elite tight ends, and then maybe even look at, kind of as JJ was talking about, like your Eric Ebrons, Andrews is going to fit several rounds after that, and you might be picking like a Dallas Goedert or a Mark Andrews, like in that range, that are just might be the next explosion. So because of Andrews' rise, JJ, where are we looking at on the other tight ends?
With Hayden Hurst, I'm fading Hayden Hurst. There are some people who still believe in him only because he was drafted in the first round. But he's old. He's an old first round rookie. He was injured last year. And like you guys said, he was thoroughly outplayed by Mark Andrews, who was picked in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Hurst was hurt for 4 games, but he didn't score a TD in the other 12 he appeared. I mean, right now his ADP is tight end 33. I have him projected to end up as lower than that. I have him in the 40s, 46. I think that Mark Andrews is the tight end to own. I don't see him coming close, unfortunately, to that tight end 1 category or 1,000 yards. But I definitely think if you're going to invest in a tight end on this team, you have to go with Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
All right. Ryan.
Another thing about
go ahead.
Hayden Hurst actually is that he flamed out of minor league baseball because of a case of the yips. It just might be a mental thing too. There's that history, and I don't really see him as much of a football player, let alone a fantasy option.
Something to consider, definitely. Why don't you give us a recap of your rising, fading, and sleeper as we tie up the Ravens here?
All right, Mark Andrews is rising. Get him now while he's cheap. I'm not fading anybody on this team. They're young and trending up. And Gus Edwards is a sleeper, just a name to keep an eye on.
All right, my rising star is Lamar Jackson. I'm fading Hayden Hurst, and my sleeper is Willie Snead.
Kind of a copy here. I'm rising on Lamar Jackson. I'm fading Gus Edwards, and my sleeper is Mark Andrews. So let's move on to the Bengals. A new coach this year, hopefully new life for them. You're looking at a quarterback just to kind of start off with in Andy Dalton. JJ, you and I are both, Ryan, you and I are both fading Andy Dalton. Would you like to start off on your rationale there?
It's not really that I'm fading Andy Dalton. It's more that he's as good as he's ever been. And the real question is whether that's a good thing or not. And that's about as much as a thought as I put into it, I'll be honest.
No, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. He's the ultimate serviceable quarterback in fantasy, from what I think. I just don't think that there's anything special about him anymore. I think we know what he is, right? He hasn't tossed more than 25 touchdowns since 2013. I am hopeful, like I said, that Zach Taylor can help Dalton, see a bump in his production at this point of the year because he's supposedly a quarterback whisperer. I hate that term so much just because I don't think that it even encompasses how you can, talk to your players, but I can understand. I'm only drafting Andy Dalton in places if I'm in a league, like, again, a super flex league where I decided not to take two quarterbacks early, which I'm not going to lie, I'm never not going to do that. Or he's somebody late that's available in the later rounds that I can use for bye week fill-ins. He's not somebody I'm depending on at all in quarterback leagues, and he rides the waivers. So it's just, I don't have high hopes for the Bengals like we mentioned earlier. I think that Andy Dalton could, surprise people, but he's not something that I'm going to put my chips on. Therefore, he is a hard fade for me going forward. If you're looking at the running backs, Mixon is... Oh, what?
Our very own J.J. Wenner has Andy Dalton listed as his sleeper.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I was transfixed by the BS coming out of your mouths.
Oh, good.
About the red rifle.
Oh, good. As long as we're
I'm sorry.
here.
I'm awake now. Thank you. No, I'm just kidding. Like, you guys are absolutely right. Andy Dalton is not a sleeper in one QB leagues, right? He will be the perfect late round QB that you can plug and play throughout the season in one QB leagues. You can pick him up off of waivers, spot starts. But in Superflex leagues, Andy Dalton is a great pickup late in drafts. Now, his worth took a little bit of a hit with the injury to Jonah Williams, their first round starting left tackle that they just drafted. So everybody on that team just took a little bit of a step down. But his current ADP is QB 29. He's coming right around Daniel Jones, Josh Rosen, and Drew Lock. Now, despite what you think of Andy Dalton, with Zach Taylor coming in there as coach, I think his upside is a QB 2 and nowhere near where he's currently being drafted. So if you can get him up as your third QB, you're going to be able to start him, and hopefully after a few good games, some injuries are going to happen to other QBs, and you're going to be able to trade him for a better asset, especially in Superflex leagues.
Wait, so Jonah Williams hurt the value of Bengals players?
His injury hurt he's out for the year.
Oh.
Wow,
I missed that.
I just
Yeah.
Andy
he
Dalton to
got
me
hurt.
is like fast food, right? Like you're kind of embarrassed when you get it, and you don't want to see that you have it. But then when you take it back home or you sit down in the restaurant and you eat it and it just tastes so good, that's the best analogy I can do. Like I especially I work around a bunch of vegetarians and health freaks that I can't even bring that stuff in the office anymore. So I don't know if you feel the same way about
Yeah,
the,
that was
fast
pretty
food.
weird. I just like Andy Dalton
I
as
thought
a
that was
QB.
a darn
not
good
as,
analogy.
Not
Thank
as any
you very
fast
much.
food or.
Why don't
He
you just
played good.
rip me apart more often, JJ? Okay, and my love for fast food. All right. Anyways, let's move on to the running backs, and I think that you all agree, Ryan. If you'd like to start off with Joe Mixon here.
Yes. Joe Mixon, Jonah Williams being injured for the season kind of hurts my offensive line argument. But either way, last year I was very low on Joe Mixon. I didn't love the 3.5 yards per carry he had as a rookie. I thought that maybe he get a slow start in 2018 and lose passing downs to Gio Bernard. Mixon ended up balling out. He finished as a top 10 running back in both standard and PPR formats. I'm excited to see how good he can be this year. Year 3, he's going in. He has a couple years under his belt. He is with AJ Green aging, he is the focal point of that offense. But I think that Joe Mixon can be like a top 8 kind of running back in 2019, and I don't think that's out of the question.
Michael, your thoughts?
It's interesting. He kind of makes me mad. And do you ever get that feeling when somebody, maybe that doesn't burn you, but you just kind of get a raw feeling? I had Mixon and Devonta Freeman last year in the league, and both of their injuries really early set me back a little bit. And it was tough, except for the fact that he still played 14, 15 games. I'm really looking at, again, the Zach Taylor addition and scheming Mixon into better matchups because, they like to do a lot of pre-snap movement like the Rams did. And I think that Mixon's going to just, again, scheme to better matchups and maybe get some more red zone carries too this year. I'm not comparing him to Todd Gurley at all, but, they like to get creative with him. I do think, the having Giovanni Bernard there caps his reception potential. Mixon had 73 receptions in the past 2 seasons. So he has the opportunity to ball out, and I would not be surprised if he does. He's still a top 10 running back going forward for me. So I would be confident drafting him at that spot.
Any interest in Trevion Williams or Rodney Anderson?
I like the rookies they brought in, but I don't think they're going to challenge Mixon very much for carries. Honestly, with Williams and Anderson, I think that Gio Bernard is a little expendable. Mixon has the receiving ability. Rodney Anderson's kind of all around good. I think they're great dynasty pickups, but in redraft leagues, no, I'm not seeing it unless there's an injury.
I talked about Rodney Anderson several pods ago, and just, again, he has fought through 3 different injuries. My sleeper is actually Trevion. It won't be, at least in the first half of this year, and it probably would require an injury, but he is somebody that I would target in like the 4th round of a startup rookie draft, or you know what I'm saying, if you have, whether it's separate or not, if you do have a rookie draft, like, again, a 4th rounder is pretty good, I think, for that. Again, 3,600 yards in 3 seasons in college, that had 34 touchdowns. It was over 6 yards per carry in the SEC. He's a proficient pass catcher. Get a little bit of experience on him, and he could jump right into Joe Mixon's role. So definitely a draft late in rookie drafts for me.
All right, so my rising star is my man A.J. Green. Not dead yet. The rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated. So last season, A.J. Green, in the first 8 games, had 46 receptions for 694 yards and 6 TDs. He was the wide receiver 38 in PPR last year for the full season. And
Right,
he only
he
played
played-
in 8 games.
Exactly.
I mean, so before his injury, he was the wide receiver 8, above Michael Thomas, above Juju, Julio, Mike Evans. And he suffers an injury, and now all of a sudden he's garbage? I mean, I see him going for less than a first-round pick in some trades. A.J. Green is going to ball out this year. When he is healthy, he is a number 1 wide receiver. And there is no reason to think that he won't be this year. So if you have, you can probably get him right now towards the, I would say, middle to end of the 3rd round in a startup. Make sure you're getting A.J. Green.
I'm with you. I originally was fading AJ Green, and I changed my mind really quick after just some preliminary research.
Me too.
That fact that you kind of said about it, about what you can kind of get for him, I would have gone even further and said if you're not getting a top 6 or 7 2020 first rounder, then you hold. I think just because of the value that he represents of what he can do, so many people, even in the Dynasty community, are so quick to look at just a half of a year or even a full year. I do love Tyler Boyd. I am extremely excited for his upside. I am just not ready to let go of AJ Green, and you should not either, unless you get some pretty good compensation back for AJ Green. I do think, however, that Tyler Boyd can still be another 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, I'm not going to put it on AJ Green just being gone. That was just, again, based off injury. He's a good player, and he's in position to continue getting those first-team reps and continue getting passes. It's so hypocritical of me, to love A.J. Green and love Tyler Boyd, but then be as sour as I am on Andy Dalton. But, again, this is an up-and-coming wide receiver, and I would very, very comfortably be happy with him as my personal wide receiver 3 on a team. Sometimes maybe even better.
Absolutely. One of my favorite wide receivers is one of Ryan's as well, Stanley Morgan. Tell me about Stanley Morgan, Ryan.
Yeah, Stanley Morgan, he was an undrafted free agent out of Nebraska, and I'm still baffled at how he went undrafted because he looks great on film, and his career statistics back him up. Outside of AJ Green and Tyler Boyd, who I believe hit his ceiling last year, which if that was his ceiling, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a pretty good ceiling to have. But outside of those two, I don't see a whole lot. And I think that John Ross, is he even a thing anymore? But Stanley Morgan,
No.
I believe he could. Yeah, I don't see it either. But you never know. Year 3 for receivers, But I think Stanley Morgan actually has a great shot at coming in and becoming the wide receiver 3 in Cincinnati. He's a tough receiver, and he's good. He's good at making those tough catches over the middle. He's a great possession receiver. He's going to be reliable. He's one of my favorite undrafted rookies from this class, and I think he's going to catch on in Cincinnati in a big way.
So let's touch on the tight ends, and JJ, I believe that you have the floor in this instance.
Yeah, I do, but it's kind of cheating. Tyler Eifert is my fading player, and I wrote, "Is that cheating?" He had all of the promise, but none of the delivery. I hate when people say players are injury prone. I feel like it's an unfair label. But if the walking boot fits,
Ooh.
you might be injury prone. Unfortunately, Tyler Eifert's injury prone. If he can be healthy for 8 games, it's going to be a victory. I think he could have a high touchdown variance. He had that season a few years ago where he scored 13 TDs. That is his upside, but man, he just cannot, for the life of him, stay healthy. Yeah. So I won't be drafting him unless it's very late in a tight end premium league. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody else at the tight end we're interested in?
Not in 2019. Maybe Azuma, because he did have a pretty solid season in relief last year.
And he's fresh on a new 3-year contract. It was worth more than $18 million. He had 43 passes for 439 yards last year. That might be spot start category. It kind of depends on how deep your league is, but he could be a player that you could play in matchups, definitely, I think, probably off waivers, even in dynasty leagues.
Anybody want a little taste of Drew Sample or no?
No, I do not want a sample of Sample.
Yeah, I think I like other players better. We talked in Jacksonville about Josh Oliver. I'm not. I don't have him anywhere, and I probably won't.
All right, Ryan, can you give us a recap? All right, Rising Star, Joe Mixon. I'm fading Andy Dalton, but And my sleeper is Stanley Morgan in deep release.
My Rising Star is A.J. Green. I'm fading Eifert, which is a cheating for me. And my sleeper is Andy Dalton.
I like Tyler Boyd as my Rising Star, fading Andy Dalton, and my sleeper was Travion Williams. So let's move to a team that has had so much off-season hype. We're talking about the Cleveland Browns. We're going to do it up a little bit differently with the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield here. I know I am excited with him, and then we're going to switch to the wide receivers because they are pretty darn exciting. I'm going to stick with it here with me really quickly just because I'm looking at Baker Mayfield as a top 5 dynasty quarterback. I know a lot of people have him, in the 5 to 10 range. I know it's kind of split. There's you guys have talked about having it in the 1 to 5 range. I know we've had those discussions. This is really an interesting year to judge him, wouldn't you say? He's got all the talent in the world. He's got the cojones to pull a lot of things off. Big expectations. Freddie Kitchens has that pretty nice pedigree. His first head coaching stint. I will say I did laughingly call for 45 touchdowns from him in an over and under segment we did probably about a month ago.
Wait, you weren't serious about that?
I'm going to walk back on that a little bit just to be in all seriousness. He's not going to get it, but I really find it hard-pressed to look at a team with so much talent, young talent, at every position and not look to the signal caller with all of those options. Again, he's a kid in a candy store this year. And if, Kitchens lets him go, which I don't know that he's going to have much of a choice because Baker's going to start ruling the roost there. So he's my rising star. I would be excited to have Baker, again, as a dynasty quarterback going forward. I think, the sky's the limit with Baker Mayfield. What do you guys think? JJ, is he still somebody that you are targeting in drafts or that you'd like to even to trade?
Right now I have him projected to finish as the QB5. I don't know if he's necessarily somebody I'm personally going after, only because I think his cost is way too high right now.
Right.
So you won't be able to get him at any type of value. So I wouldn't make any moves for him. I'm not reaching for him in any drafts. So I like him. I think he's going to have a great year, but he's not able to be priced bought right now.
Yeah, he's my quarterback 3 in Dynasty, and I reached for him in one draft. I actually traded up to select him, but that's just because I'm a huge Baker Mayfield fan, and I wanted one share of him at least. I kind of agree with JJ here, though.
So then, like I said, we're going to play it a little bit different here. Usually we jump to the running backs, but Ryan, I know that you've got some wide receivers that you've just been itching to talk about, so go for it.
Yes. Everybody knows about OBJ and Jarvis Landry. They're both phenomenal. Odell Beckham he's a game-changing talent, and Jarvis Landry is one of the best slot receivers in the game. But one receiver that's being forgotten in this entire mix is Antonio Callaway. And Antonio Callaway, he had first-round talent, but he fell in the draft because of off-the-field issues. So, of course, all of this is contingent on Callaway staying out of trouble, which I think he can. He did a pretty good job of it last year. As a rookie, he had 586 yards and 5 touchdowns with flashes of wide receiver 2 potential. All eyes on the opposing defenses are going to be on Odell and Jarvis Landry. So I think that Antonio Callaway could see a lot of targets just because he's going to be that one guy that's not accounted for. And I really think that Cleveland can be almost a like this year's version of the LA Rams, where you do have those 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers.
Okay.
Of course, like last year, LA, they should have had 3 receivers go over 1,000 yards. They were all on pace for it. Cooper Kupp, of course, he ended up getting hurt, and then Josh Reynolds stepped in for him. But it's feasible that this could happen, that Cleveland could have 3 fantasy-relevant receivers while getting their tight end involved and their running backs involved in the passing game too. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And I really like Antonio Callaway to take a step up this year, and that's why I have him as my rising star.
So it is not feasible. It's not within the realm of possibility. And there is no way in hell that there's going to be 3,000-yard receivers.
I'm not arguing for
Cleveland.
3,000-yard receivers. I'm arguing for 3 fantasy-relevant receivers, and I think it's very possible because Baker Mayfield's a better quarterback than Jared Goff is.
Yeah, again, for Jarvis Landry to be remotely fantasy relevant, he needs to be fed targets. If he's being fed targets, where's OBJ going to get his targets? He's a target hog.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
there's not enough targets to go around. I mean, and you did say that, like the Rams, they could have 3 or at least 2 guys getting up around 1,000 yards. But
I think
if you look at their yards per target, to get to 1,000, OBJ would need 113 targets, Landry would need 142, and Callaway would need 135.
I think
There are
with
not
all the
3
mouths to
players on
feed.
this team
Right.
getting over that many yards per target. And Callaway right now at OTAs didn't even run with the ones. Right now, Rashard Higgins, who is my favorite Hollywood in the AFC North, is getting much more play as a wide receiver, as the wide receiver 3 on that team. I mean, Callaway's a knucklehead. You said it. Higgins is in his 3rd year. He's ready for that 3rd year breakout, and he's listed as the starting receiver opposite of OBJ. I think he's much cheaper than Antonio Callaway and has much more upside. So, but, I mean, I think we're putting way too much on them to think that they're going to feed 2 top wide receivers, a top tight end, a top running back. I don't think that Freddie Kitchens and Todd Monken are that level of offensive genius that Sean McVay is. I'm sorry. I would have to see it to believe it.
I'm not going to put anything past Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah.
I think the chef is cooking up something pretty good there in Cleveland. But that's not my Bama bias speaking, I promise.
I was just about to say that, and you called it out yourself. I love that. I have Higgins as my sleeper as well. The Browns did go empty set often, and Higgins actually has a pretty good bond with Baker, kind of going back to last year when they were both on the second team. Higgins yet led the Browns in yards per catch, percentage of catches that resulted in a first down, and most yards per route run. That was last year. I know I'm kind of throwing a whole bunch of stats, but nearly half of Higgins' targets were more than 15 yards in the air, so Baker's going to give him a little bit more jump balls, and he caught a majority of his targets, too, to the tune of 390 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, I like his potential. I struggled with Callaway, actually, last year's, and he had a case of the dropsies, too. It seemed like he was dropping a couple. I know in that Jets game early on when Baker came in for the first time and led that team back, Callaway had a couple deep bombs dropped. So I don't doubt his talent. I just want to see more for him. What are we thinking as far as some of the running backs in this on this team, Ryan?
Cleveland has 2 of the 10 best running backs in the NFL on their roster right now, and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Cleveland's also in a very unique position because it's not every year that you have like a potential top 5 running back on an 8-game suspension who after half a season just becomes a part of your team. It's going to be very interesting to see what effect Kareem Hunt has on the Cleveland Browns once he does return to the field. Just because I think that he is such a good player that he can just completely alter the way that offense looks. And if it's good, I think it's going to become great. And even to be conservative here, if Kareem Hunt only gets 10 to 12 touches per game, which is very reasonable, I think he's still going to do a lot of damage in that kind of role. He's just a supremely talented player who does make the most of his touches, and I think that him and Nick Chubb, their play styles kind of complement each other in a way to the extent that they can coexist and both be fantasy relevant players.
No, that's a fantastic point, and I think a lot of people are jumping to draft both those backs. I wanted to fade Duke Johnson because, let's face it, he's an idiot. He wants out of this team. He's fired his agent. I don't know what the heck's going on. He's requested trades. I don't understand why you'd want out unless you look at it from just the pure college transfer that sees automatically that he's not going to see the field whatsoever, and he just wants to go to a place where he can play. Then I can understand that. But I would want to get in on Cleveland right now. I wouldn't want to get out. I thought that would be kind of an obvious fade, so I'm going to save my fade for a little bit later here. But I know that Nick Chubb is just one of those backs that he's young, JJ, and he looks good on a good offense, and he's just super exciting right now.
Yeah, Chubb is currently going off the boards at running back 10. Last season, he started 9 games. He put almost 1,000 yards on the board with 8 TDs. He's an easy running back 1 this year. Kareem Hunt is not a threat to him at all. Chubb is the real deal. He averaged 5.4 yards per touch last season and had 10 total TDs on 212 touches. I see his total touches going up to almost 300 this season. and he's going to end up right around 1,500 yards. Right now, he's part of like the tier 3 group of running backs. He's in the same group with like James Conner, Devonta Freeman, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Melvin Gordon, if he ends up playing, and Kerryon Johnson. So I am very high on Nick Chubb. He's going to be used early and often, and I don't see Kareem Hunt threatening his touches at all towards the end of the season.
Yeah, you mentioned Melvin Gordon, and some news broke earlier today, again at the time of this recording of this podcast as we're talking about it, that Melvin Gordon is, has a very interesting thought, because he's informed the Los Angeles Chargers that unless he receives a new contract, he's not going to report to training camp. So as we kind of go through these division previews, it's a really interesting opportunity. I think that now Chubb jumps ahead of a player like him. I think I would probably draft Chubb ahead of all of the players that you named at running back. Previously, I liked Melvin Gordon, but I might take that shot on Chubb now instead if I was drafting any startup or looking to take that type of player there.
I have to agree with that, actually. As far as Melvin Gordon in Los Angeles, I'm saying bye. You have two really good backup running backs. Melvin Gordon's good, but he's not that good. If he wants a trade, I'll grant him his wish.
Yeah, I love Melvin Gordon. I think the running backs in the NFL are getting abused by the current contract. They're being held and used up before they can hit their money, which is a shame. I have no problem with him holding out like Le'Veon Bell did. Something has to change. And, the NFL made such a big deal out of putting caps on rookie contracts. But an average running back lasts, 3-4 years in the league? And then he's gone. Like that, yeah. They don't get to a second contract. So capping their earnings is ridiculous. And I can't blame anybody for believing in themselves and holding out for more guaranteed money.
Yeah, we just saw a similar thing, too, with Josh Jacobs in Oakland. I mean, they gave him his money, but they were kind of playing around with him a little bit, too, for a while there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't mind any person trying to look out for their own well-being at any job whatsoever. So if Melvin Gordon can get a better contract, or at least get a trade where so he can find a team to pay him, more power to you. Let's shift really quickly to the tight ends. And JJ, I'd like to kind of give you a layup here really quickly. I'm going to start with my fade. My fade is actually, and this was so hard for me to do because I own him in several places, is David Njoku. If you talk, with this type of fade, because you look at a player who is top 10 in receptions, yards, and touchdowns at the tight end position. He was healthy all 16 games, and even improved when Kitchens took over as the play caller. He's just the least exciting player to me on this offense. And, the NFL can be really flashy, and I'm sorry if this is just kind of the worst reason in the world when we're playing this Hollywood story here. I just look at an air raid offense that Todd Monken's going to bring, and when he puts receivers vertical, many people think, oh, yeah, hey, tight end in the open field. That means Njoku's going to be open. But if I'm really trying to think about this, is OBJ is and has been super successful as in the slot and in the middle of the field. And I see no reason why you wouldn't take a player of that caliber and use him. So why not the Njoku fade? It was a tough one for me just because he's my player, but I had to fade someone, and like I said, least exciting to me.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Michael. I'm fading David Njoku as well. I like him, but he's currently going off the board at tight end 7. There's too many mouths to feed. I said it before. I don't see this offense sustaining everybody's worth. I don't think they're that strong of an offense that they're going to be able to do that. I hope they prove me wrong, because then it's going to be a fun year watching them. I just don't think it's going to happen. Any other tight ends we should worry about?
In Cleveland, no.
Seth DeValve, Demetrius Harris was a pretty solid, big-bodied tight end over at backing up Kelsey on the Chiefs. We don't think they can bring anything to the table?
I mean, they'll bring something to the table. That's why they're on the team. But they'll be those kind of guys that have, like 15 to 20 receptions, 200 to 300 yards. They're not really fantasy relevant guys, but they're going to be contributors on the team. So maybe in deeper fantasy or best ball leagues, on the week that one of those guys does have a touchdown by chance, they might win you a week, possibly. But I'm not looking at them outside of that.
All right, can you give us a wrap up?
All right. So I am rising on Antonio Callaway. I'm not fading anybody on this Cleveland team. Everybody is young and either in their prime or about to go into their prime. So, just sit back and enjoy the show. And my sleeper is Kareem Hunt, because he does have top 5 NFL running back potential.
All right, I am rising on Nick Chubb. I'm fading David Njoku, and my sleeper is Hollywood Higgins.
Baker Mayfield is on the rise for me, fading David Njoku, and should watch out for Rashard Higgins. Finally, we'd like to talk the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that is always exciting. I think, Ben had such a great year last year, and is looking to possibly do it again. But JJ, you're not on that train. You're not on the Ben train here.
No, I am not a fan of Ben Roethlisberger as a person or as a teammate. I'm not a fan of the direction of the Steelers. I think that team has sort of gotten away from itself. But more importantly, Ben led the league in passes last year with 675 attempts. That was the league high by 36 pass attempts. It's bound to fall. They can't keep passing like that. They lost AB. And, they invested in Snell. They kept Connor. They kept Jalen Samuels. They're going to be running the ball more. So I don't see Big Ben replicating what he did last year. So I am fading him.
We're in kind of a precarious position really at this point, because let's jump right into the running backs, and I'm actually fading James Conner. I am not sure kind of what's going to happen with that backfield. You look at James Conner, he was a first half stud and a second half dud. Now again, Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell figured, really to be in that mix. I would say the fade on James Conner is more because I don't think he's a top 5 back, and he should not be drafted as one. The presence of those two other backs cap his ceiling, and I just don't see very many 25-plus carry games for James Conner. I am excited to see what that offense does. I do think that they will run more, but it's going to be spread out between the three. Connor's just not the bell cow, that essentially people think he was going last year. Just the reports are all coming out that it's just a shared backfield. So a slight Connor fade for me. And just to those people that are really looking at him in the top 5, top 6, he's outside that for me.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Connor. He is one of those players that has played on his image as a good guy, and he's not a good guy. But he is going to be the bell cow for that offense, in my opinion. The Steelers don't spread the ball around. They don't like to split carries. They like to feed somebody until they break. I mean, look at Le'Veon. All they did with Le'Veon is feed him the ball. So I don't see them going away from what they know. I think they brought in Benny Snell in case they break James Conner and they need to put somebody else in. But I actually, as long as Conner stays healthy, I think he's going to end up as a top 10 running back this year.
That makes me nervous. I think any person would want to see, when a coach gets to play with a new toy. But yeah, if you're going to run him into the ground, that I struggle with the dynasty implications, right? If your mention of a running back's going to last 3 to 4 years on average, he doesn't stand out to me really in any way. He was, again, the plug and play second option for when Le'Veon Bell held out, and again, he's not the he might have bell cow potential, and then you might use him to do well in a league 1 year, but I'd much rather put my my hopes and dreams on another running back that would last longer and put up similar stats.
Yeah, I don't have any shares of James Conner, and I don't plan on buying any. But I think if you're looking for 1 year results, he'll be good this year.
JJ, why don't you take us into the wide receivers again with AB leaving? That leaves us with Juju atop the depth chart.
I mean, most of my notes for players are very long-winded because I'm very long-winded. But for Juju, all I wrote was ascending talent, vacated targets, pass-happy QB. There's nothing else to say about him. He's in the perfect situation to be a wide receiver 1. And he has, there's nothing else to say. So, Michael, do you want to add?
Well, there is something left to say, JJ. Thank you very much. But I don't have much because I think that everyone is really excited about a wide receiver in a great position that's, in his early 20s. So wide receivers, though, that typically have a top 24 season generally continue to repeat that feat. So with Brown no longer on that roster, I just think it's not debatable that Juju is the wide receiver 1, obviously. It's kind of interesting of when you talk about his target share, there might be a legitimate shot because in a pass-happy offense that he's looking somewhere between, 170, maybe 190 targets. That's crazy. You want this guy on your roster, and he's going to be young for a long time. I'd only worry about a backup, with whether it's Mason Rudolph that eventually takes over, because Juju's going to be there a long time. So do you trust another quarterback that's not named Ben Roethlisberger? You have to make that call. I'd be happy with him now. Juju's looking good. Ryan, anybody else on that? There are several other wide receivers that we'd love to talk about, but who are you looking at?
So I just wanted to chime in on Juju. He's my number 4 dynasty wide receiver, but a receiver that I have my eye on particular is Deontay Johnson, the rookie out of Toledo. I don't think he's exactly going to burst onto the scene, but there's a wide receiver 2 slot in Pittsburgh that is just ripe to be filled by somebody. And I don't think it is James Washington. I think that it could be Deontay Johnson this year. And, apparently he's already impressing in Pittsburgh. They have good things to say about him. He was a great player at the University of Toledo. I believe in Deontay Johnson, and I think that he is going to be a more valuable target for Big Ben than any other receiver on the roster that isn't named Juju Smith-Schuster. So that's actually who I have down as my sleeper in Pittsburgh. He might not. Go on.
I'm a big fan of Dante Moncrief. I think that he is definitely going to be the wide receiver 2. Everybody keeps talking about Deontay Johnson or James Washington, but I think they're both fighting over the third wide receiver role there. I don't really see either of them challenging Moncrief. So, from all reports out of OTAs, he was getting into a nice rhythm. He's currently slotted to start opposite of Juju Smith-Schuster.
Say that 5 times fast.
Juju Smith-Schuster?
Not
No,
literally. Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But if there's somebody who is a deep sleeper for me, and I know it's a deep sleeper, Ryan Switzer is currently not being drafted. He's backing up Eli Rogers as the slot receiver. But I love Ryan Switzer. He has an 82% catch rate. He's quick. He returns both kicks and punts. He does a solid job doing it. And I think he can be utilized as a Julian Edelman or Wes Welker type. And if he gets a chance to be the wide receiver 3, he's going to put up great numbers. And if he doesn't, he's going to be cut, and he'll be the next great receiver for the Patriots.
It's true. They tend to grab.
Anybody else? Who else are we looking at there?
A receiver, nobody else is on my radar.
You know, I'm not ready to give up on James Washington just yet, and I don't think that anybody that has him is either, right? You drafted him on potential, you're keeping him on potential, and he's one of those that if he comes out and, busts out a couple good performances, that might carry over to the rest of the season. So I'd be interested to see what he has left. I don't really have much to go on in depth with my sleeper, which I didn't really mention. We were talking about quarterbacks as Mason Rudolph. Just the prevailing thought of how much longer can Ben do this? What is he going to do with his contract status? He does get beat up. I'd like to see Rudolph actually get in there, as a second-year pro. So could be interesting because he does have one heck of an arm. So anybody else that we need to touch on, JJ, before we wrap it up?
I think we need to go to tight end.
Well, that would be smart, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we do need to go to tight end because Pittsburgh actually has a pretty good one. So Vance McDonald, I feel like this is a little-known fact, but he finished as a tight end 1 in both standard and PPR scoring formats. He caught 69.4% of his targets, in 2018. And that was also while dealing with the presence of Jesse James, who is no longer with the team. He's now a Detroit Lion. As long as Vance McDonald stays healthy, I can see a little bit of a late 20s kind of breakout from him. He might not have 1,000 yards, but I could see him being like a 60 reception, 8 to 900 yard kind of tight end, and that would put him pretty firmly within the top 10 at least. So this year I have Vance McDonald as a rising star because I think that he can have a really solid season as a starting tight end. There are a lot of vacated targets in Pittsburgh right now, and they have to go to somebody. And McDonald's a pretty solid player who I think can, as the sole starter on a team, I think he can have a really great season.
The only other person on that team is Xavier Grimble. I don't see anywhere and have not heard anything, and no one is writing anything, and no one is talking about Xavier Grimble as projected to see any kind of consistent snap. And at this time, he's not a viable fantasy option to me.
I've never even heard of Xavier Grimble.
I have. He's a blocking tight end. He's actually a pretty good blocker.
Okay.
He just doesn't get a lot of play in the passing game.
So that means he should not be on your team.
Exactly.
Great blocker, not fantasy viable. All right, Ryan, let's give us a wrap here.
All right. Vance McDonald is my rising star. I'm not fading anybody on Pittsburgh. I think that everybody there is either in their prime or ready to enter it. And Deontay Johnson's my sleeper. I think he's going to be a really good player.
My rising star is Juju Smith-Schuster. My fading star is Ben Roethlisberger because everybody on the Steelers is not heading into their prime. And my sleeper is Ryan Switzer.
I am going to go with Juju as the obvious rising star. I put the slight fade on James Conner. Forgive me, James. Sorry. And then my sleeper was Mason Rudolph. So I think that was a fantastic show, guys. We knocked that out of the park. We are going to be coming back as we continue our division previews. Remember, you can catch all of our content at Rider Dynasty on Twitter and RiderDynasty.com. Ryan, what did you think of the show?
I thought it went great. I feel good about this one.
I do too. And JJ, thanks for obviously all the contributions and the stats that both of you guys brought. But JJ, why don't you take us out and say goodbye?
Bye, Felicia.
Have a good night.
Catch you in the next one.
Boat drinks.
Thank you for listening to the Ride or Dynasty podcast. If you have enjoyed the pod, please subscribe and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Follow the guys on Twitter at Ride or Dynasty. You can follow JJ at JJ Wenner. Ryan is at BixPixFFB. And Michael is at Michael S. Kloss. Check out our website, rideordynasty.com. And remember, we have your back.
Your reputation far exceeds your skills, Mammy Rammer.